My name is Mariana and I'm 40 years old. I work as a medical assistant and have been married for 12 years. My husband John and I have two wonderful children, a son who's in third grade and a daughter who's in first grade. John and I met when he frequently visited the hospital where I work to handle sales. I was the one who always assisted him. At first, we only exchanged small talk, but when we discovered we had mutual friends, our connection deepened. After sharing several dinners, we started dating, and 3 years later, we got married. John is incredibly bright, well-spoken, and a natural communicator. He often says that working in sales was his true calling. To be honest, John wasn't my type physically at first, but as we got to know each other, I found myself falling in love with him. It's been 15 years since we first met, and even now, after the kids are in bed, we can talk for hours, losing track of time. Our children, Patrick and Katie, have grown up wonderfully, and like their father, they are both talkative and full of life, making our home lively every day. I think we're a pretty typical family. John is also very hands-on with household chores. Sometimes he'll announce what he's cooking for dinner, like tonight's steak, and when he does, Patrick and Katie eagerly head off to school, excited for the day. John wasn't always a great cook. In fact, when we first met, he couldn't cook at all. But over time, his cooking skills have improved, and I'm amazed at how much he's learned. The reason John handles dinner is because I'm often not home in the evenings. My mother has been in the hospital for a long time due to a chronic illness, and I visit her every day after work. Initially, I would rush home to prepare dinner, but one day John offered to take over. He told me, "I'll cook dinner and take care of the kids. You focus on spending time with your mother." His kindness brought me to tears. From that day on, I made sure to prepare breakfast and do as many household chores as I could before work. John took care of dinner, looked after the kids, and helped them with their homework in the evenings. My mother has been in and out of the hospital for the past 3 years, and lately her condition has worsened. I'm not sure what the future holds, so visiting her every day helps me cope with my anxiety. I lost my father in an accident when I was very young, and as an only child, it was just my mother and me until I got married. My mother was a smart woman, working in the same medical office as I do now. She also invested in stocks with the inheritance from my father, which brought in extra income. Thanks to her, I was able to attend private schools and live without any financial worries. When my mother was temporarily discharged from the hospital, I repeatedly told my mother that I wanted her to live with us, but she always shook her head, perhaps out of concern for our family. "It's okay, Mariana. You worry too much. I'm better than you think," she would say each time I asked her to stay with us. Fortunately, my mother was able to manage her daily activities on her own and didn't require any nursing care. However, I was still anxious, so I made it a point to visit her every day, even after she was discharged from the hospital. Since I have to work, I could only visit her in the evenings on weekdays. During the day, my Aunt Michelle would visit her. Aunt Michelle is single and has been running a small restaurant since before I was born. As a little girl, I often went to eat dinner with my mother at Aunt Michelle's restaurant. When my mother was away at work, Aunt Michelle would take care of me and keep me company. During my rebellious phase, whenever I fought with my mother, I would run away to Aunt Michelle's place to cool down. I vividly remember how, over the food she cooked, our conversations would make me forget what I was angry about. In many ways, I feel like I was raised by both my mother and Aunt Michelle. Her cooking is amazing, and some of her regular customers have been coming to her restaurant since I was a little girl. Even after I got married, my family often visited Aunt Michelle's restaurant for meals. Then one day, I visited my mother at the hospital until just before visiting hours ended, and by the time I returned home, it was quite late. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was still at our place and the children were still awake, all 4 of them relaxing in the living room. "Oh, Mariana, welcome back. Were you visiting your mother at the hospital again today? You must be exhausted after such a long day," she greeted me. My parents-in-law live about a 5-minute drive from us. My mother-in-law, Rachel, doesn't bully or pick on me, but she can be quite stubborn, which makes it difficult for us to get along. Once she decides on something, she insists on having it her way and won't budge. When Rachel visits our home like this, it's usually because she wants money. My father-in-law, Craig, still has a job and works very hard, but we're not wealthy by any means. For the past few years, Rachel has asked us to send her $500 every month as living expenses. However, lately she has been coming over more often, asking for additional money whenever she claims to be in need. Today, Rachel said she came to see her grandchildren, but I suspected she probably wanted money. After we made sure the kids were in bed asleep, Rachel turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm short on money again this month. Could you give me a little more?" John, frustrated, replied, "We've been giving you money for living expenses every month. My father is still working, so what are you spending all that money on?" "Don't be so angry," Rachel responded. "I'm getting old and I have medical bills to pay. Are you telling me not to go to the hospital? Besides, your father's salary has been reduced because of the recession." Every time she asks for money, John tries to reason with her, but Rachel never backs down. I've witnessed this exchange many times, but no matter what, my mother-in-law always finds an excuse and refuses to leave until we give her the money. I calmed my angry husband down and handed Rachel the $200 I had just found in my wallet. After giving her the money, John left to take a bath, so I walked Rachel to the door. "Thank you, Mariana, you're always so supportive," she said with a smile. Then, in an unusual turn, she asked, "By the way, how is your mother doing?" It was the first time Rachel had ever inquired about my mother, which caught me off guard. She had hardly ever visited her, so I wondered why she was asking now. Nevertheless, I replied, "Well, she's still the same. The doctors have told me this hospital stay is going to be a long one." Rachel nodded and then, to my surprise, bluntly asked, "Oh, I see. What will happen to your inheritance?" I was taken aback by her sudden question, so I responded, "What inheritance? What do you mean?" Rachel continued, "I was just wondering if you've already had those conversations with your mother. I believe she has a sister, right? You should talk to your mother about this matter now, before it's too late. After all, you wouldn't want to have any trouble with your aunt about the inheritance when the time comes, would you?" Her words made me angry and irritated, so I replied firmly, "Don't worry. My aunt and I don't have that kind of relationship. There won't be any trouble." A few weeks later, John, who had taken the children to his parents' house for the holiday, came home in a panic. "Mariana, my mother bought a mansion near your workplace." "A mansion near my work? But that place is still under construction," I said, confused. Since we lived in the countryside, the mansion was quite conspicuous. Whenever we passed by the construction site, John and I would often wonder who would live in such a grand place. "What? Where did she get that kind of money?" I asked, completely baffled. Asked him in surprise. Where would she get that kind of money? John shook his head, clearly puzzled. "I have no idea. I questioned her a lot, but she wouldn't give me a straight answer. Maybe she's relying on my father's retirement money," he speculated. A thought crossed my mind. If Rachel can afford a mansion, does that mean we don't need to give her money for living expenses anymore? Exactly, John agreed, his frustration growing. It doesn't make any sense. If she has enough money to buy a mansion, she should have more than enough for her living expenses. We were both angry and irritated, realizing we had been giving Rachel money, believing she was in need. If she could afford a mansion, her claims of financial hardship were clearly false. John and I decided then and there that we would stop giving her money, no matter what she said in the future. Supposedly, her mortgage and deposit on the mansion had been approved, and it would be completed in 6 months. Rachel had told John she was thrilled about living in a mansion during her old age. But just a month after this conversation, my mother passed away. I was in shock because she had seemed well and healthy when I visited her the day before. It was a bittersweet blessing that I received a call at work saying my mother was in critical condition. I was able to leave early and rush to the hospital, just in time to be with her in her final moments. She may have been waiting for you to come, Mariana, Aunt Michelle, who had arrived earlier, said softly as I broke down in tears. There was so much to handle with the wake and funeral that I barely had time to grieve. After seeing my mother off and returning home, the reality of her absence began to sink in. I lost all my strength and broke down in tears, but my children comforted me. After the funeral, I spent the rest of the day busy with cleaning up my mother's house. As Aunt Michelle and I sorted through her belongings, we came across so many memories, and I couldn't stop crying as they flooded back. John was incredibly supportive during this time, helping with the household chores and taking care of the children, despite being busy with work himself. I can't express how grateful I am for his support. My children were so sweet and attentive to my feelings. Patrick tried his best to cheer me up with funny stories from school, while Katie proudly showed me her A+ on a test, hoping to make me smile. I cried a lot after my mother's passing, but John, Patrick, Katie, and Aunt Michelle took such good care of me and gave me the strength to get through it. 3 days after the funeral, when I returned home from another day of cleaning up my mother's house, Rachel was there again. As soon as I walked through the door, she abruptly said, "When will you get the deposit?" "The payment is due soon." "Deposit? Payment? What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "I'm talking about your inheritance. You got a lot of money, didn't you?" Rachel demanded. "Inheritance? I renounced my inheritance," I replied, surprised by her aggressive tone. "What? Are you kidding me?" Rachel's voice boomed, echoing throughout the house. After my mother passed away, I found out that her inheritance was nearly $2 million. My mother had told me she wanted me and Aunt Michelle to split it 50-50. However, my mother often spoke to me about her wishes for Aunt Michelle, saying, "If anything should happen to me, please take care of Michelle." I hoped Aunt Michelle would use my inheritance to renovate her restaurant. "Oh, Mother, don't say such ominous things," I often replied when she brought up the topic. Even the day before she passed away, my mother was still worried about Aunt Michelle's restaurant. "Are there still customers coming to Michelle's restaurant?" she asked. She mentioned the AC breaking down again, and I'm concerned. Aunt Michelle's restaurant, built before I was born, was indeed showing its age. My mother had offered many times to help with renovations, but Aunt Michelle always refused, saying she felt bad about spending my mother's money and didn't want to close the restaurant during repairs. While Aunt Michelle managed to keep the restaurant running, the building was deteriorating, and the cost of necessary repairs was becoming a burden. She once confided in me that although her loyal regulars still came, attracting new customers was difficult, likely due to the restaurant's outdated appearance. Having been a frequent customer myself, for many years I wanted Aunt Michelle to continue running the restaurant for as long as she could. Aunt Michelle, who had always prioritized work, spent money on the restaurant even if it meant cutting back on her own living expenses. She lived on the second floor of the restaurant, leading a very frugal life, which worried me whenever I visited her. Although the cost of ingredients had increased, she hardly raised the prices on her menu, always prioritizing her customers' satisfaction. Given that John and I both work and are financially stable, I felt no need for the inheritance. I wanted Aunt Michelle to have it all so she could finally renovate her beloved restaurant. Initially, Aunt Michelle refused, but when I told her that my mother had been worried about her even the day before she passed away, she finally agreed to accept it. When I discussed it with John, he supported my decision. We had been regulars at Aunt Michelle's restaurant since we started dating, often remarking on how delicious the food was and wishing she had more customers to enjoy it. When I told Rachel that I had renounced my inheritance, she snapped at me, her voice filled with anger. "What? Why would you do such a thing without consulting me? How am I supposed to pay for my mansion now?" "Your mansion? What are you talking about?" John interjected. "I thought you already finished paying it off." Rachel, clearly frustrated, retorted, "The down payment is due in just a week." I've been waiting for your inheritance to come through." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The idea that Rachel had bought a mansion expecting to use my mother's inheritance to pay for it was infuriating. "What did you just say? Don't you dare bring my mother into this," I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. "Even if I had received the inheritance, why would I pay for your mansion?" This was the first time I had ever spoken so strongly to my mother-in-law, and tears of anger welled up in my eyes. "Of course you should pay for my mansion. I'm your mother," Rachel yelled. "You were so eager to get your mother's inheritance that you neglected your own family just to visit her." Her words were like a slap in the face. "How could you say such a horrible thing? I never wanted anything like that." My mother didn't want it either. "Please, just leave." I had only ever been concerned about my mother's well-being. I never once discussed inheritance with her. All I wanted was for her to live as long as possible. Thought that Rachel could claim any right to my mother's legacy was beyond infuriating. "Mom, that's just plain rude," John said, his tone firm. "Mariana never had any such idea in her head. And what did you do for her mother? You barely even visited her. I'm really disappointed in you. Please go home. We won't be supporting your living expenses anymore." Rachel's face twisted in anger as she spat out, "You two are terrible children. I'm leaving." She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. After she left, John turned to me, his expression filled with regret. "I'm so sorry about my mother. I had no idea what she was thinking." "You don't have to worry about her," John said, apologizing as he spoke. Later, John explained that because of Rachel's age, she had agreed to a shorter mortgage term, which required a higher down payment. From that day on, Rachel called John daily, trying to get him to lend her money, but he stood firm and refused. As Rachel's demands became more persistent, John decided to talk to his father, Jeff, about the situation. When he did, both Jeff and Rachel came to our house to apologize. Jeff was completely in the dark about what had been happening. He knew they were planning to buy the mansion, but he thought they were going to use their savings. He also had no idea that John and I had been giving Rachel money for living expenses, or that she had been asking for even more. I was shocked to hear from Jeff that Rachel had told him she was coming to our house to help with household chores while I was away visiting my mother in the hospital, something she never actually did. Jeff had left the money management to Rachel and was surprised to discover that she had far less saved than he believed. When Jeff confronted her, Rachel admitted that she had made poor investment choices, leading to significant financial losses. Jeff sincerely apologized to both John and me. "Mariana, I'm truly sorry for my wife's behavior. Rachel made a serious mistake and will handle the payments for the mansion. Please forget about it. I'll also make sure she repays the money you both gave her, even if it takes some time," Jeff said. Turning to Rachel, "Rachel, you need to apologize too." "I'm sorry," Rachel mumbled, her voice small, lacking the forcefulness she'd shown before. "It's all right if you're sincere," I replied, watching my mother-in-law shrink before my eyes. Despite the difficult situation, I felt a sense of relief. In the end, Rachel didn't have the money for the mansion's down payment. When she tried to secure a new loan, it was denied. Since Rachel had already given notice to move out of their current house and had nowhere to go, she and Jeff decided to downsize to a smaller apartment with lower rent. Rachel, who had never worked before, started working part-time to repay us. To lift our spirits, I took my family to Aunt Michelle's restaurant for dinner. Aunt Michelle excitedly told us that she had found a piece of land just around the corner and decided to build a new restaurant there instead of renovating the old one. "I want my regulars to keep enjoying my food every day," she said with a smile, offering us a taste of the new dishes she plans to serve after the relocation. After the move, Aunt Michelle will live in the house where my mother used to live. The new restaurant will be completed in a year and we're all looking forward to it. "Thank you so much. If anything ever happens to you, I'll be there for you. You can count on me," Aunt Michelle said seriously, her warmth evident. Her cooking has always been delicious, the same comforting taste I've known since childhood. Katie and Patrick love it too, and they were thrilled. As we enjoyed Aunt Michelle's food together as a family, I couldn't help but feel that my mother was smiling down on us from heaven.
Seriously, don't have the baby of a guy you've broken up with. Could it be that you couldn't forget about me? Did you think that if you had a child, I'd never be able to cut ties with you? How naive is that? Hey, what do you say? It's just ridiculous looking back. Breaking up was absolutely the right decision. If I had stayed with such a delusional man, I would never have achieved the happiness I have now. Today, I want to talk about my unforgettable dark history and the revolt against it. My name is Jessica. I'm a 53-year-old housewife who enjoys doing household chores while watching the morning news. I was 38 at the time, living peacefully with my husband Mike. However, around that time, a bit of unrest started to creep into our home. Mike would respond to what I said with a "so what?" or an oddly intimidating or indifferent manner. I would try to continue the conversation, but he would cut me off with "I'm busy right now." I felt dismissed, treated with disdain. It wasn't like him at all. He used to love to chat and crack jokes to make me laugh whenever he had the chance. Then this transformation happened. It was such a sudden change that I wondered if I had done something wrong, but I couldn't think of anything specific. One day, I noticed a faint lipstick mark on the back of a shirt Mike had brought to the laundry. He had come home late from work, claiming he had to work overtime. It was hard to imagine that someone at Mike's male-dominated office had leaned against his back with lipstick on. If that were the case, it was too scary to even think about. Could it be a woman? I wondered. Although I naturally came to that conclusion, a lipstick stain alone was hardly conclusive evidence. There could be countless excuses, like accidentally bumping into someone. I decided to wait a bit longer to gather more evidence, carefully checking for any unusual behavior from Mike. Ironically, just paying a little more attention revealed a slew of evidence of infidelity. For instance, Mike would always get up to use the bathroom around 2 a.m. when he was sleeping at night. I had never doubted him before, but it turned out he was using that time to talk to a woman on the phone in the bathroom. There were also instances when I found long strands of hair inside his suit jacket, and sometimes, upon closer inspection, his handkerchief seemed to have traces of what appeared to be lipstick. The most damning piece of evidence was a tinted lip balm I found when I borrowed Mike's car for the first time. After a while, it would be another story if Mike was known to use colored lip balm, but this seemed like the most indisputable evidence I had found. After 10 years of marriage, the frustration of having Mike taken by someone new, along with the loneliness of not wanting to be alone, and the resurgence of my affection for Mike were overwhelming. Is there really no chance of starting over? Isn't there something I can do to make him look my way again? Isn't there a way to rekindle what has cooled off? Just as I was pondering these thoughts, the reality of my pregnancy became clear. Needless to say, I thought pregnancy at this timing was a gift from God. We don't have children, and the monotony in our relationship might have been the cause of Mike's affair. Maybe this pregnancy could be the chance for him to change. Holding on to that hope, I brought up the pregnancy of Mike. But then, what the heck? Give me a break. This is such a hassle, let's just break up. I couldn't believe my ears. Well, looking back, I think my judgment and expectations were too naive. The likelihood of a man who's cheating coming back is extremely rare. Life isn't like a TV drama where things just work out smoothly. But back then, I truly believed that since we married out of love, we could surely find our way back to each other. Is that really how you're going to say it? It's your child too. Even for the child, it would be better off for a dad like me not to be around. You've realized it too, right? Seeing Mike's smirking face made my heart skip a beat. That I'm having an affair, pretending not to know about Mike's affair, and hoping the pregnancy would magically fix everything. It felt like I was being pushed off a cliff at that time. I thought if the affair was brought to light, things would get tense, and Mike would never come back. But that was a misjudgment too. I wanted you to find out and did so much to let you, but you never said a word. I was at my wit's end, waiting for you to say, "This is unthinkable. Let's get a divorce." You really made me go through a lot of trouble. You're kidding, right? I wouldn't bother with such a hassle if it were a lie. I have a cute 24-year-old girlfriend now. A 38-year-old about to get fat from pregnancy. I have no use for you anymore. Here, take this as alimony or whatever, just agree on a divorce, he said. After that, I cried for 3 days and nights. Eventually, when Mike stopped coming home, I found the resolve to divorce. 5 years have passed since then. I was afraid of growing old and being single, but fortunately, I remarried my childhood friend Steve, also a divorcee, and we live modestly with our child, Chloe. Steve had been cheated on by his wife too, a fellow survivor of a messy divorce. Being comrades who shared the same pain made life with him very comfortable. On our anniversary, he would book a fancy restaurant every year, and for my birthday, he would get me something slightly expensive. I felt cherished. I hoped these days would continue forever. As we celebrated another anniversary this year, it was supposed to be a delightful dinner at our usual upscale restaurant. Wow, Jessica, is that you? The person who gasped upon seeing my face was Mike. What? Why are you here? I couldn't hide my disgust. What a tragedy. I had accidentally run into Mike coming out of the restroom. What? I'm here for a business dinner. Unlike you, I'm busy. Mike glanced over my shoulder and approached briskly. Wow, so you had the child, huh? The one you were pregnant with when we split. That's gross. Saying that, Mike grabbed the child's hand, looked closely, and began to say outrageous things. Seriously, don't have the child of a guy you've broken up with. Oh, could it be that you couldn't forget about me, thinking that if you had a child, I'd never be able to cut ties with you? How naive is that? Hey, what do you say? Mike, grinning, seemed to be having a great time, spinning the child around by the hand. The child's face twisted in distress, and he started crying out loud. Daddy, Mommy, help! Some stranger is taking me. There, I'm your daddy, and your mommy's right over there. You're just like her, a stupid child. Just when Mike blurted out those words, suddenly, a man towering over, taller than 6 feet, appeared from behind and forcefully grabbed Mike's arm. Excuse me, but that boy is mine. You know that. Mike's bewildered expression almost made me burst out laughing. Huh, is this guy your new husband, Jessica? I didn't answer Mike's question. I'm not sure what you've been saying, but surely you don't think you can make someone's child cry and get away with it, do you? The tall man said, glaring at Mike. A glimpse of a tattoo peeked out from his arm, and noticing it, Mike instantly turned pale. Wait, Hey, Jessica, tell your husband to stop. Excuse me, that woman is not my wife. What? Confused again, Mike glanced back and forth between me, the man, and the screaming child. What? Then who is this child? Before he knew it, Mike's arms were bound by the man. This man is a lunatic repeating nonsense. Someone call the staff. There's a man here harming a child. The man's outcry stirred the restaurant. What a day this turned out to be on such an important anniversary. With a smirk, I thought to myself, it turned out to be quite a memorable day, although unexpectedly. Waiter, over here. I saw this man forcibly grabbing a child's arm. My words left Mike gaping in shock. Wait, Jessica, what? What's going on? Seriously, I don't understand what's happening. As Mike frantically protested, I said, I am not that man's wife. And that child is neither mine nor yours. But he was right behind you. You were blocking the narrow passage to the restroom entrance, standing there like a post, preventing the boy from entering. He was simply following his father to the restroom, and you obstructed him. What? Really? You might want to make people the butt of your jokes, but you should be careful of jumping to conclusions. Why don't you look around a bit more? Shut up. I don't need to be lectured by you. Indeed, my valuable words probably wouldn't reach a suspicious person like you. I'm not a suspicious person. Well, any man who approaches an unknown child, grabs their arm, and then uses baby talk like, I'm your daddy, is undoubtedly suspicious, no matter how you look at it. But that was, And then you tell the woman in front of you, "Oh, mommy is right there, isn't she? Are you still under the impression that we're married?" As I said this with a smirk, Mike turned red with anger and shouted, "Don't mess with me." But the louder Mike's voice, the tighter the grip of the man holding him. "Ow, ow! Hey man, back off! I'm innocent, innocent. It's undeniable that you made my dear son cry, isn't it?" But that was a misunderstanding, I quickly interjected. "It's a fact that you misunderstood and assaulted someone else's son on your own accord." Then Mike glared at me and said, "You jerk." Yikes, getting glared at by a suspicious person. How scary. I responded sarcastically, with a hint of mock fear in my voice. This seemed to irritate Mike even more, and he began to struggle wildly against the man restraining him. "Thinking you and I are still a couple, huh? Or could it be you haven't forgotten about me?" I taunted him with the same accusation he had thrown at me earlier. Predictably, Mike got angry, and sensing the danger, the tall man quickly pinned him to the floor. "If you thought you could escape from me, you're sorely mistaken." While the man might have meant it lightly, the tattoo visible on his arm made the threat seem all too real. "Come on, Jessica, tell them it's a misunderstanding," Mike pleaded. "But dragging someone else's child by the hand isn't just a misunderstanding," I retorted. "I thought he was my child," Mike said, his voice breaking like a child, which made me burst out laughing. "You claim him as your child without even acknowledging or paying child support. What did we ever discuss about acknowledgement or child support after our divorce?" "Well, no, but you knew I had no intention of acknowledging, which is why you never contacted me, right? Idiot. I wouldn't just let it go. If I had a child, I'd make sure you acknowledged and paid up one way or another. Then why that time the pregnancy test was wrong? I went to the gynecologist and it turned out I wasn't pregnant, which solidified my decision to divorce. Yes, during those 3 days when the topic of divorce came up and Mike stopped coming home, it's true that I spent that time crying. But considering I might have had a child, I couldn't just divorce without clarification, so I first went to the gynecologist. I wanted to sort out alimony, child support, and future living expenses in my head. Even if we were going to divorce, if avoiding the divorce would benefit the child, I was prepared to endure. However, at the gynecologist, there were no signs of pregnancy, but they did find a tumor on my ovary. During the surgery for that, I happened to share a room with Steve's mother. Steve and I were childhood friends, so I knew his parents well. Reuniting with Steve during his visits, we became close again. At one point, I thought of the pregnancy as a blessing from God to make things work with Mike, but in reality, it brought me to someone who made me realize that parting ways with Mike was the right decision. It also led to the early detection of my illness, and despite having one ovary removed last year, I gave birth to Chloe, my child with Steve. It may seem like I've been through a lot, but in truth, it's all been for the best. Upon learning everything, Mike turned pale and muttered, "No way. I got dumped by that woman." Needless to say, I couldn't help but laugh. Well, it's no surprise a young woman wouldn't want to be with an aging man like him. At that moment, a police officer appeared. It seems someone from the restaurant had called them. Mike received a stern warning from the police, and it seems the misunderstanding was cleared up. He apologized profusely to the child's family, which prevented the situation from escalating. The scolding from the police seemed to have hit him hard. He even came to apologize to me. Since Mike doesn't know where I live now, he actually went to my parents' house to express his apologies to my mother. He admitted that the way we parted was the worst and that he was wrong. Aging, having been abandoned by his affair partner, and finding himself increasingly isolated, the recent incident seemed to have broken him, leaving him to feel the loneliness of having no one to comfort him. Well, it's too late for apologies now, as far as I'm concerned. I continue to ignore Mike. Honestly, if we hadn't met there, I probably would have gradually forgotten about him altogether. By the way, Steve noticed I hadn't returned to our table for a while and came to the restroom to check on me. However, he decided to watch from the shadows, thinking this might be Jessica's first and last chance to get back at Mike. Of course, I was ready to jump in if anything happened, but that guy restraining Mike was just too strong. That guy apparently used to live in Mexico and was the captain of a football team there, I mentioned. No wonder he's strong, I guess. I had no role to play there. I was seriously scared. Thought he was from some dangerous profession or something, he said with a laugh, and I couldn't help but laugh along with him. Normally, one might say something like, "Not very manly of you." But Steve doesn't have to deal with Mike, and I believe it was a problem I needed to resolve myself. I acknowledged that I lacked strength during the divorce. In the end, I simply went along with the divorce as Mike wished and received a standard amount of alimony from Mike and his affair partner. Reality doesn't always progress like a fairy tale, so getting an exorbitant alimony was out of the question, and I had lost the strength to fight back. But I believe I finally became truly strong by standing up to him with unwavering resolve. In the end, now I can proudly face Steve and Chloe. Coincidentally, this year's anniversary became a new beginning for me, and now with Steve becoming a freelance architect and his income doubling, I quit my part-time job and am enjoying life as a relaxed housewife. When I ask Chloe, who's somewhat in a rebellious phase, to do something, she complains, but when I stay silent, she quietly helps out. This trait of hers is something that only Steve and I see secretly find irresistible. Though Chloe is our only child due to a late pregnancy, our family of 3 and our 2 dogs live a life that's lively, perhaps too much so. Despite never having children with Mike, I was able to conceive and give birth at an older age with Steve, even with just 1 ovary remaining. In a way, I consider this to be fate. As a child, I secretly dreamed of marrying that special someone destined just for me. And who would have thought that dream would come true with a second marriage? Sometimes I allow myself to indulge in such dreamy thoughts. With these reflections, I cherish the ordinary days that come my way. Days that are anything but ordinary, filled with love and gratitude.
My name is Erica, and I'm 39 years old. My husband Mark is 6 years my senior, and we've been married for over 15 years. This year, our daughter started high school, which marks a new chapter in our lives. After settling down to raise our child, I started a handmade business. It's been thriving, and I'm increasingly busy with orders. While things seem to be going well professionally, my married life has been a different story. Mark and I met at work, where he was my trainer. His maturity and the 6-year age difference initially attracted me. We started dating, and not long after, I discovered I was pregnant. But unexpected news led us to marry quickly. Due to severe morning sickness and Mark's request, I resigned from my job and became a housewife. As soon as I left work, I was expected to handle chores at my mother-in-law's house, which was just a 5-minute walk from ours. Despite my struggles with morning sickness, I was pressured to help out, as my mother-in-law insisted it was my duty as a wife. My husband and mother-in-law frequently reminded me that, as a wife, I was obligated to handle household tasks and follow my mother-in-law's directives. This constant pressure made me start believing that I had no choice but to comply. Living with a growing child and having quit my job made it hard for me to rely on my own parents for support. Divorce was never a consideration at the time. Fortunately, Mark was kind to our daughter, Nancy, and I managed to endure the situation. However, things changed when Mark's brother married and had a baby boy. My mother-in-law's attitude shifted, and she became critical of Nancy, often lamenting about the lack of a male heir. Mark, worried about his mother's views, began to distance himself from Nancy, who he had once cherished deeply. Mark's family is not involved in business and lives off their vegetable garden and a large backyard. They had land generations ago but gave it up long ago. I couldn't understand why there was such a fixation on heirs, especially with outdated notions about the eldest son and heir. To protect Nancy from hearing these hurtful words, I tried to limit our visits to Mark's parents. During my pregnancy, they called frequently, but after Nancy was born, I often refused their visits. I wanted to focus on my daughter and distance myself from my in-laws' selfish expectations. When I finally reached the end of my patience, I made a decisive change. As soon as my daughter turned 2, I returned to work, despite my husband and mother-in-law's displeasure. Anticipating their resistance, I kept my decision to myself until I had secured a job and enrolled my daughter in daycare. During this time, a friend suggested I try making handmade goods, and what started as a hobby quickly evolved into a passion. I began creating and selling my work, and it gained momentum after a friend admired a piece and wanted to purchase it. Her praise encouraged me, and soon her friends followed suit, spreading the word about my creations. As demand increased, I decided to sell my items online. The orders kept pouring in, and what began as a side job soon became my full-time career as a professional artist. Despite my success, I continued to distance myself from my in-laws. Visits during holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas were inevitable, though. As my daughter grew older, my mother-in-law began to impose household chores on her, insisting, "She's a girl. It's expected." It was infuriating, but my daughter's calm demeanor helped me keep my composure. Although these visits were infrequent, they were painful to endure. I felt heartbroken watching my daughter quietly do her chores, feeling pity and sadness as I witnessed her comply with my mother-in-law's demands. Meanwhile, my husband enjoyed his time socializing with relatives and siblings, seemingly unaffected by the discomfort I felt. I felt even more miserable as I walked into the house. "Hi there, you must be hungry. I'll make dinner soon," I greeted my daughter when she came home from school. But she seemed different. Her usual cheerfulness was replaced with a sullen expression. She called out to me, but her eyes were distant and troubled. Concerned, I rushed over. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" I asked, but she only shook her head silently. My daughter had always been calm, never shedding a tear since starting middle school. I waited patiently, hoping she would open up. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "Dad? What about him?" I prompted, sensing something was deeply troubling her. Her eyes filled with tears. "He was hugging a woman," she said, a tear escaping down her cheek. More followed, and soon her face was streaked with tears. Over time, my husband and I had grown distant, though we remained united for our daughter's sake. Despite our strained relationship, I had hoped he would stay faithful, and I accepted his lack of involvement in housework and childcare. I never blamed him for that. I was determined to avoid raising our daughter in a single-parent household, so I convinced myself that our situation was tolerable. We might not smile together, but as a family of three, we could still find moments of laughter. Now, though, my husband's betrayal was clear. My daughter's tears were a painful reminder of the love and trust that had been eroded, and I felt a deep sadness in seeing her cry about something so heart-wrenching. I felt my eyes burn with anger as I looked at my daughter. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you apologizing, Nancy?" I asked, though I could see the pain in her eyes. She remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Seeing her distress only deepened my own. I felt like I was failing her as a mother. "I'm sorry, Nancy. I'm just such a weak mother. If I hadn't seen it." "No, Nancy, you didn't do anything wrong," I reassured her, though my heart was heavy. Her uniform was damp with tears, and her face was trembling as she clenched her fists. My own tears, which I had tried so hard to hold back, began to fall. "I can't forgive him," I said softly, my resolve strengthening. "Honey, can we talk for a minute?" I asked my husband when he came home. "I'm tired," he replied curtly, barely glancing at me. His cold tone would usually have silenced me, but today was different. "I have something important to tell you," I said, struggling to stay calm. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and sat down across from me at the dining table. "What's it about? What have you been up to today?" "Of course, I was working," I answered, though his dismissive attitude only fueled my frustration. Without warning, he slammed his hand on the table, yelling, "What are you asking me?" I took a deep breath and continued, "I saw you hugging a woman." I didn't mention that Nancy had seen it too. My husband's reaction was immediate and harsh. "So what?" he snapped, looking at me with a scowl. "What about it?" "Are you cheating on me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He laughed derisively. "What else could it be?" His mockery left me speechless, my mind reeling from his offensive demeanor. As he noticed my reaction, he looked at me with an expression that mixed disdain and curiosity. "What's wrong with that?" he asked, his tone dripping with contempt. "What do you have to complain about?" "It's an affair," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You don't even care about our relationship." His response was chilling, as if it were all just a matter of fact. "We got married because you were pregnant. We stayed together out of obligation. What more do you want from me?" His words cut deep. "I've been here all this time, supporting you," he continued, his laughter bitter and victorious. When he noticed the divorce papers I had prepared, he grabbed them from me. "Divorce papers? What's this?" You thought showing me these would make me listen? Nonsense. If you want it so badly, I'll sign them for you, he said with a sneer. He filled out the papers with exaggerated motions and threw them at me. How can you even think of divorcing me? I've been taking care of you while you're not even working. You quit your job just because you had a baby. You're nothing. His harsh words echoed in my mind as I looked at the divorce papers on the floor. You should be grateful I'm not the one asking for the divorce, he continued. If you don't want it, don't say anything. With that, he took out his phone and began dialing. His sweet, false voice made it clear he was calling his girlfriend. I knew I couldn't confront him about it, so I stayed silent. About a month later, it was time for our annual Christmas visit to my in-laws. My husband was eager to go, bustling around to get ready. Hey, I said, trying to catch his attention. I need to talk to you. Not now. We're running late, he replied dismissively. You can talk to me at my parents' house. He hurriedly bundled me and our daughter into the car, his excitement palpable. As usual, he was the only one chatting cheerfully, while I felt the weight of our unresolved issues and his lack of respect. Welcome home, he said as we arrived, but his words felt hollow and meaningless to me. When we arrived, my mother-in-law greeted us with a forced smile and ushered us into the living room. We exchanged pleasantries with the relatives who had arrived before us. Oh my God, it's so nice to see you after such a long time, my mother-in-law said with exaggerated cheerfulness. Her emphasis on long time hinted at her displeasure over my recent absence. I knew she resented that I hadn't been visiting as often. As my daughter-in-law, you need to help with the chores, she always said whenever I came over, though she never asked the same of my brother-in-law's wife. But then again, they lived far away and rarely visited. My mother-in-law directed me to the kitchen. I didn't mind helping at first, but when she also urged my daughter, Nancy, to join, I felt a pang of frustration. No, I began, but my mother-in-law cut me off. She's a girl, she should be able to do this, she said, her tone dismissive. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I turned to my husband, who was preparing drinks. Honey, we need to talk. What is it now? He responded, irritation evident on his face. This can't wait. It has to be now, I insisted, ignoring his annoyed expression. Erica, let's handle this later, he said, clearly wanting to avoid the confrontation. Let's focus on the party for now. But my mother-in-law interrupted again, concerned about how her relatives would perceive her. You're my daughter-in-law. I have plenty of work for you, she said, trying to divert attention from the issue at hand. After scanning the room and seeing the curious glances of her guests, she muttered, On Christmas Day, I'll make sure she and her daughter handle everything. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, holding my daughter's hand firmly. I'm done with this. I'm getting a divorce. What? What are you talking about? My husband and mother-in-law gasped in shock, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. I tried to ignore the chaos and focus on leaving with my daughter, but they blocked our way. What do you mean by divorce? My mother-in-law demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. She glared at both me and my husband, who was clearly caught off guard. It was evident he hadn't been expecting this revelation. I mean exactly what I said. I'm divorcing this man, I replied firmly. What? I didn't hear anything about this, my husband stammered. What's going on? You told me to go ahead and file the papers if I wanted a divorce. Well, I've done just that, I said, my tone unwavering. My husband was left speechless, clearly unable to process the situation. His optimism had clearly blinded him to the reality of our marriage. You weren't serious about this, were you? He finally managed to ask. Of course I was serious, I replied. Thank you for the papers. I've already submitted them. And as for why I'm telling you here, look around. This is exactly why. You've avoided any real conversation about this, and now we're facing it. My husband's face turned red as he realized the full extent of the public humiliation he was enduring. He had avoided discussing our issues, and now the consequences were unavoidable. But my mother-in-law wasn't done. What's this about? I can't believe you're divorcing my son. You must have done something wrong, Erica. I looked at her incredulous. How can you be so sure I'm at fault? Your son is trembling, and you still think it's all my fault? My husband was clearly at a loss for words, flustered by the unexpected revelations. My mother-in-law, still in shock, demanded, How am I going to explain this to others? I turned to Nancy, who had been watching the scene unfold. Nancy, why don't you tell them what you saw? Nancy's cold gaze cut through the tension as she spoke. Even though Dad is cheating on Mom. What? My mother-in-law froze, unable to process the new information. My husband, stunned, could only look at Nancy in disbelief. Why? Nancy asked, her voice trembling. I saw you hugging another woman. What? My husband stammered, clearly caught off guard. It's okay, Nancy, I said gently, though I could see the disgust in her eyes. She no longer wanted anything to do with her father, and it broke my heart a little. I wondered if I should have kept her from coming today, even though she'd insisted on it. Are we done here? I asked, ready to leave. This is false accusation, my husband suddenly blurted. You have no proof. I'm not divorcing you. His defiance caught me off guard. How can you say that? You've always claimed you never loved me. Is this about maintaining appearances? You don't have any proof, he shouted, stuttering as he tried to defend himself. I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out several photos, scattering them across the floor. Here's your proof, I said. The photos showed him walking hand in hand with a young woman. The evidence was undeniable, and he could no longer deny his actions in front of his extended family. His face turned red as he scrambled to gather the pictures. Why did you? He began, but his voice trailed off. I think you've gone too far, I replied. I never condoned cheating. I had hired a private detective to investigate my husband's behavior. The detective not only followed him but also recorded his conversations with the woman who had spoken freely about my husband's behavior and even made derogatory remarks about me. How did you know that? My husband asked, his face paling. The relatives surrounding us looked on in shock, and my mother-in-law's face was one of disbelief. Mary, I'm not your son anymore. My husband said. Even if I was married to your son, I had no obligation to take care of this house. I said firmly. I'm done. From now on, please contact my lawyer. With that, Nancy and I left. I had already filed for divorce and was pursuing alimony. Although my ex-husband initially resisted, the hard evidence I presented made him concede. I also filed a claim against the woman he was involved with, and she agreed to compensate me. The scandal spread among their relatives and neighbors, causing them considerable embarrassment. My daughter and I embarked on a new chapter, free from the ties that once bound us. As a handmade artist, my business thrived with an influx of online orders. My daughter informed me that our story had even made its way onto social media. I'm finally free from the constraints of my past. Despite the hardships, I now have the opportunity to do what I want, take care of my daughter, and fully enjoy my life. Call an ambulance. Hurry up. My husband, who always rubbed me the wrong way, collapsed on the floor, drenched in a greasy sweat. The paramedics arrived swiftly, assessing his condition before lifting him onto a stretcher. Are you his wife? One of them asked me. Could you come with us to the hospital? As my husband lay there on the stretcher, he looked at me with pleading eyes. I met his gaze without wavering. No, I will not, I replied firmly, without a hint of hesitation. What? He murmured, his voice tinged with confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. This man is a stranger to me, I continued coldly. So, I'm not coming. What? Please handle everything else, I said, turning away from him. Wait, Lydia, wait, he called out desperately. But I had something else in mind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an object I had been carrying for days. The moment his eyes fell on it, his face turned ashen. How dare you treat me like a slave all these years? I said, my voice steady. This is my revenge. I will never forgive you. My name is Lydia. I'm a 36-year-old housewife living in a rented apartment with my husband Caleb. We met years ago through a colleague at work when I was still a full-time employee. My colleague, who had many friends, often invited me to social events. Being an introvert, I preferred watching movies or cooking alone, so I usually declined. One day, my colleague convinced me to attend a barbecue. Reluctantly, I agreed. The event was crowded, and I felt out of place until my colleague introduced me to Caleb. He was tanned, clearly an outdoorsy type, quite the opposite of me. But when we started talking, I found him sociable and humorous. Surprisingly, we shared many common interests, just as my colleague had predicted. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet again. After several outings, we began dating. Caleb proposed after a few years, and we got married. He was always kind, the ideal partner to draw me out of my indoor life. But over the past few years, something changed. Caleb began saying and doing things that left me feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I quit my job to become a housewife because Caleb wanted me to. However, he often made sarcastic remarks about it. One evening, I was late preparing dinner because I had been feeling unwell. When Caleb came home, he immediately noticed. "I'm home, Lydia. Hey, why isn't dinner ready yet?" "Hi, sorry. I wasn't feeling well today, so I rested earlier and couldn't get up in time. Can you take a bath first?" I asked, hoping for some understanding. "Ha! What's that about?" he replied, clearly annoyed. "You're a housewife. You should at least have the meal ready." His lack of concern for my health made me incredibly sad. Another time, I approached him about an upcoming reunion in my hometown. "Hey Caleb, there's a reunion coming up in my hometown. I'll finish my chores, so can I go?" "Suit yourself," he replied indifferently. "Well, being a stay-at-home wife is great, isn't it? I envy you, Lydia. You get to play around with the money your husband makes." Caleb usually treated me well, carrying my purse and bringing me flowers after work. But at times he could be so callous that I wondered if he wanted me to work. I even suggested taking a part-time job, but Caleb insisted that wasn't the case, so I remained a full-time housewife. One day, I received an unexpected call from one of Caleb's relatives. I answered, feeling a bit apprehensive. "Lydia," the voice on the other end said urgently, "Caleb's mother has collapsed." I froze, shocked by the news. The relative explained that she had visited my mother-in-law a few hours earlier and found her lying in the yard. She called an ambulance, which rushed her to the hospital. Panicking, I quickly got ready and dashed out of the house. When I arrived at the hospital, I was told her condition was still critical. As I was being briefed by the medical staff, Caleb arrived, breathless and frantic. We were escorted to my mother-in-law's room, where she lay in bed, her body connected to various tubes. It was heartbreaking to see. "Mom," Caleb called out softly, but there was no response. Caleb stayed by her side for the rest of the day. I decided to head home to prepare everything needed for the days ahead. I needed to prepare for my mother-in-law's hospital stay, so I gathered everything she might need. After a while, she recovered enough to sit up on her own, but she still struggled to do anything without assistance. "I'm glad she's able to sit up," I thought. "I wonder if she'll be able to walk again if she continues with her physical therapy." As her discharge date approached, I brought it up with Caleb. "Her discharge is next week," I mentioned casually. But Caleb's response caught me off guard. "Oh yeah? Are you ready? We'll be leaving this house next week, so you'd better start packing our things." I blinked, confused by what he meant. Caleb noticed my reaction and seemed irritated. "We don't need this house anymore since we're moving in with my mom at her place," he said, his tone dismissive. "Honestly, you're still as dense as ever." "Wait," I said, trying to process his words. "Does that mean we're going to live with your mother after she gets out of the hospital? I never heard anything about that. Did you decide this without talking to me? And have you already canceled the lease on this house?" Caleb's expression darkened further. "Of course, I've already canceled the lease. It's the right thing to do for us as a family to live together and help her. Don't tell me you don't want to live with her, do you? I'm the one who supports this family, so I won't tolerate any complaints." With that, he stomped back to his room, leaving me stunned. I never imagined Caleb would take such a hard-line approach, especially without consulting me. I couldn't believe he had already canceled the lease on our apartment. I had no choice but to move out. I knew he was concerned about his mother, but this was overwhelming. I sighed deeply. A few days later, I found myself living with my mother-in-law. I had never been a caregiver before, so everything was new to me. Most of my day was spent feeding, bathing, and helping my mother-in-law with her toileting needs. She didn't want me to take care of her and barely communicated with me. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she would retreat to her bed, claiming she was in pain. When my mother-in-law was healthy, we didn't have a bad relationship. In fact, we would sometimes exchange delicious snacks we found at the department store. But now, it seemed her frailty had overwhelmed her ability to care about anything else. On the other hand, my husband Caleb, who had insisted on us moving in together, was rarely home. After work, he would go out for drinks and return in the early morning. Even on his days off, he always found an excuse to go out. When he did come home, he would lock himself in his room and play video games. One day, I decided to confront him while he was immersed in his games. "I know you can't avoid working overtime or socializing with your colleagues, but can't you at least help me take care of your mother when you're at home? or maybe help out with the housework?" I asked. Without even glancing away from the screen, Caleb replied, "What are you being so naive about? Housework and caregiving are your jobs. I'm tired from working, you know." Then, as if to emphasize his point, he added, "Oh, and I'm almost out of coffee. Go make me some and clean this room, okay? And don't forget to take these to the dry cleaner. I need them by Wednesday." He spoke to me in a dismissive, one-sided manner, tossing his work clothes at me without a second thought. This time, I felt something inside me shift. I couldn't hold back any longer. "That's enough, Caleb. I've been doing all the housework and taking care of your mother every single day for the past month without a break. Why can't you help me even a little?" Caleb slammed his game controller down on the desk, standing up with an angry glare. "How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think you owe your livelihood to? If you've got a problem with me, then get out. Pack your things and leave." His voice dripped with sarcasm as he added, Well, what about my poor mom? She's going to be left alone with no one to take care of her." His words stung, and I found myself unable to respond. It was true. I had only a small amount of money saved up, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon my mother-in-law, who was completely dependent on me. So allowing my frustration, I picked up his suit and quietly left the room. 6 months passed in this difficult routine. Then one morning, everything changed. When I went to check on my mother-in-law, as I always did, I found that she was no longer breathing. I called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. Caleb was in tears, but for some reason, I couldn't cry. I felt a strange, cold detachment as I watched him grieve. "You didn't do anything to help her," I thought to myself. And then, when I realized I no longer had to take care of her, a wave of relief washed over me. The guilt for feeling this way weighed on me, but I couldn't deny it. Time flew by, and before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed since my mother-in-law's funeral. It was time to organize her belongings. After Caleb left for work, I started cleaning out her room. I carefully placed her favorite clothes and accessories into cardboard boxes. There weren't many, so the task was done quickly. Next, I opened the cabinet by her bedside. It was nearly empty, but on the bottom shelf, there was a large tin. I recognized it. It was an old can of assorted sweets. I had given her the can when she was still in good health. Seeing it there now, I wondered why she had kept it. Curious, I opened the lid and found a letter inside. The envelope had my name on it, written shackily, "Dear Lydia." My heart raced as I quickly opened it and began to read. In trembling letters, there was a message for me. "Lydia, I am sorry for making you take care of me. I was ashamed of myself for burdening you every day. I was also ashamed of my son Caleb. I know how badly he has treated you. Lydia, you should leave him and live your life the way you want." My mother-in-law knew everything, how selfish her son was and how much I was suffering because of it. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I am glad that I was able to spend the last days of my life with you, Lydia. Thank you." In that moment, I cried for the first time since she passed away. All the emotions I had been holding back flooded out of me. I cried and cried until there were no tears left, and then I made up my mind. I would divorce my husband. 10 days had passed since I found the letter from my mother-in-law, but Caleb continued treating me like a servant. "Lydia, I'm missing one of my socks. Where is it? And take my car to the car wash today. You've got nothing else to do, right?" He was going out golfing with his colleagues, completely oblivious that today was our wedding anniversary. Not that I cared anymore. "What are you going to do while I'm gone? You can't just sit around. You need to prepare dinner, clean my room, and scrub the bathroom. You've got plenty to keep you busy." His arrogance left me speechless. "Hey, are you listening? Bring me my sock and a jacket. Hurry up, or I'll be late." Just as he finished barking orders, Caleb suddenly clutched his stomach and collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain and sweating profusely. He gasped for me to call an ambulance, his voice strained as if squeezing out the words. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sadness of the situation, as my husband yelled at me, "Hurry up, you're really useless. Can't even call an ambulance." Strangely, his words made me feel calm. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics quickly assessed Caleb's condition, placing him on a stretcher. As they prepared to leave, one of them asked, "You're his wife, right? Will you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with pleading eyes, but I met his gaze with unwavering resolve and replied, "No, I will not." His voice faltered. "What? It was as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This man is a stranger to me now," I said firmly. "I'm not coming. Please take care of the rest." With that, I pulled out something I had been carrying in my pocket for days, divorce papers that Caleb had once forced me to sign during a previous fight, always threatening to serve them if I ever disobeyed him. As he tried to snatch the papers from me, the pain in his body made it impossible for him to move. He slumped back onto the stretcher, defeated. "Excuse me, but please leave now," I told the paramedics, who finally took Caleb away. I watched as the ambulance drove off, likely thinking of him as a poor husband whose wife had just handed him divorce papers. It took some time, but the divorce papers were accepted, and the divorce was officially finalized while Caleb was still in the hospital for a week. As the ambulance left, I knew I was finally free. I was busy packing my belongings and sending them to my parents' house when I unexpectedly ran into Caleb at the grocery store. "Lydia, please don't do this to me," he pleaded. "You love me, don't you? Please don't leave me. I admit I've made mistakes. You always listened to me, no matter what I said, and I just got carried away." The once overbearing attitude he had a few months ago was gone, replaced by a completely pathetic look. "What are you talking about?" I replied coldly. "The divorce is already finalized. It's too late for you to act so fragile. Go ahead, live your life as you please." He looked shocked, as if he hadn't really believed I would go through with the divorce. His hands were shaking, and his face turned pale. "Well, that's that then. Bye." 6 months had passed since our divorce, and Caleb had once shown up at my parents' house. He rang the intercom and called out my name so loudly that I had no choice but to see him. Sure enough, he wanted me to get back together with him. When I stayed silent, he began to spill out details about his current lifestyle. He couldn't cook because he had forced me to do all the housework, so now he lived on TV dinners and takeout. He had gained 10 pounds since the divorce, his face and stomach visibly fuller. He didn't know how to do laundry, so his shirts were wrinkled and smelled strange, making him look even more disheveled. "I finally realized how much you did, Lydia," he said, starting to sob. "If I don't get my act together, the people at work won't like me." But I saw right through those crocodile tears. He just wanted to treat me like a servant again. There was no way I was going back to that. No, never. "If you make any more noise, I'll call the police," I told him, treating him like a stranger. Caleb, clearly afraid of the police, left the house in tears. I was sure he wouldn't bother me again, and I hoped I was right. While my ex-husband seemed to be leading a very inconvenient life, I was living quite comfortably. I had stayed at my parents' house for a while, but now I rented a small apartment and lived alone. My standard of living was lower than when I lived with Caleb, but I loved this new life where I had my own time and space. I had worried about finding another job at my age, but as luck would have it, a friend of mine had a contact who was retiring, and I managed to step into her role. I felt so happy to spend my time and money on myself without anyone telling me what to do. From now on, I was going to take care of myself at my own pace. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life.
I was caught off guard when I found out you weren't staying with us. I didn't make a reservation for you, and my mind went blank with frustration. We're on a family vacation that I never even wanted to go on in the first place, and now we're at a fancy hotel. My husband pretends not to notice the tension and walks away. "We'll see you at checkout, Emily," he says as he heads into the luxurious hotel with everyone else, leaving me behind. My name is Emily, and I just turned 30 this year. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my husband, Spencer, my mother-in-law, Kate, and our son, Sean, who is now 3. Spencer and I met on a blind date 7 years ago, and married shortly after. Our life together has been ordinary and free of major conflicts, and we're known among the neighbors as a loving couple. 2 years after we married, we had Sean. Spencer was busy with work but was always actively involved in childcare. I had no complaints about him, and life was manageable. However, things began to change after Sean was born. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, and Kate was set to move in with us. The last time I saw her, other than at our wedding, was when Spencer and I visited her to announce our engagement. It had been quite some time, and my first impression of her hadn't been positive. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was always kind to me and left me with a good impression. I remember his concerns about whether I was the right choice for Spencer and his worries that I might cause him trouble. His bluntness about these concerns stung, and although Spencer worked hard to win her approval, Kate's disapproving looks were hard to ignore. We eventually managed to get her approval with some persuasion, but I still resent how openly critical she was in front of me. When Kate and her belongings finally arrived at our house, I was determined to stay positive and do my best to get along with her. I helped her unpack and was relieved to see she was kind to Scene. Spencer and I divided the tasks. He handled the heavy items while I took care of the smaller things. Unpacking went smoothly, until a minor issue arose. "This is supposed to go over here," Kate commented, referring to a fake plant I had placed to brighten up the room. Although I was annoyed by her criticism, I moved the plant to where she wanted it. She then spent some time watching TV and didn't offer any help with the unpacking. I was busy managing Scene and finishing up the packing, but couldn't ask Spencer, who was resting after handling the heavy lifting, for help. I ended up finishing the task with mixed emotions, feeling the strain of trying to keep the peace. Tried to convince myself that Kate was just struggling with the change in her living situation and pushed aside my frustration towards her. However, her criticism persisted daily. One morning, after waking up early to prepare breakfast for everyone, I attempted to take a break. But Kate's voice cut through the quiet. "If you have time to rest, you should be cleaning up the house." She never gave me a moment's peace, constantly criticizing how I did things. Meanwhile, she was rarely home during the day and never seemed to lift a finger herself. The constant strain was wearing me down, so I decided to talk to Spencer about her behavior. "She must be having a hard time adjusting," I said, hoping for some support. But despite knowing how she treated me, Spencer didn't intervene. I would lay in bed each night, my hands on my forehead, overwhelmed and unable to sleep. No matter how I felt, my 3-year-old son would cry at night from the exhaustion. I struggled to get out of bed to comfort him, and Kate, disturbed by the noise, would shake me awake, scolding me for not attending to him sooner. "How can you still be sleeping when your son is crying? It's your job to take care of him," she would yell, berating me for my fatigue and inability to keep up. I didn't want to escalate things, so I quietly got up, but the stress left me with no sleep that night. When Spencer was off work the next day, I planned to cook lunch. Kate, however, had already started preparing the meal. When she placed the food on the table, one plate was noticeably missing. "Looks like one plate is missing," Kate said. "I made it for Spencer, who works hard, and for my grandson. There's none for you. Make your own." I was stunned and hurt. It became glaringly clear that Kate's behavior was more than just criticism. It was deliberate mistreatment. I had been trying to ignore it for a while, but it was impossible to overlook any longer. I struggled to tolerate Kate's behavior, trying to convince myself that she was just being tough on me to make me a better wife. If I didn't keep thinking this way, I would have crumbled under the pressure. Unable to voice my frustrations to Kate directly, I confided in a friend after dropping Scene off at daycare. "That's definitely bullying. How are you holding up?" she asked, genuinely concerned. I detailed everything to my childhood best friend, who listened with empathy. Her concern and support overwhelmed me, and I finally broke down in tears. I had been battling my frustrations alone for too long. She reassured me that I was doing my best and that things would get better. "I'll help you. We'll figure something out," she promised. Although our conversation was brief because we both had commitments, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. My friend suggested a couple of things. One idea was to use a recording device to capture what was being said in the house. On my way to pick up Scene, I bought a cheap recorder. When I got home, I found Kate out as usual and took the opportunity to set up the recorder discreetly. While cleaning, I noticed a piece of paper that had fallen from a drawer in Kate's room. When I picked it up and unfolded it, I discovered it was a personal loan agreement for $20,000. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. but I decided it might be useful and tucked the paper into my pocket. After a while, Kate returned, and soon Spencer came home just in time for dinner. As we sat around the table, Kate began her usual complaints. Then out of the blue she mentioned, "By the way, my friend gave me a discount coupon for a one-night stay at a 5-star spa hotel." Her mention of the coupon seemed like a hint that she wanted to go. Spencer was enthusiastic about the idea, and even seemed excited. I, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled and braced myself for what I anticipated would be an unpleasant experience. "Well, since you're here and you work so hard, you might as well join us," Kate said. I was taken aback. Hearing such an offer from someone who had been so critical of me was astonishing. Part of me wondered if she meant well, though I struggled to believe her offer wasn't made with some ulterior motive. She wanted to book everything for the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep, trying to decide what to do. By morning, I was still conflicted. I sat for a long time, pondering the trip. Sean wanted to go, but since Mom wouldn't be able to watch him, and it would be difficult to take him with me alone. Needed Spencer's help. "You don't support me when your mother mistreats me." "I don't want to go," I said. Spencer was at a loss for words. He knew I was right and was caught between wanting to please his mother and addressing my concerns. He pleaded with me to reconsider, so I decided to set a condition. "Fine, but first, take a look at this," I said, showing him the loan agreement I had found in Kate's room. Spencer's face went pale as he read the document, revealing Kate's $20,000 debt. He was shocked and couldn't believe his mother was in such financial trouble. "Can we help her pay this off? As her son, I can't just ignore it," he asked, knowing that I was responsible for managing our finances. "Of course," I replied, understanding the complexity of the situation. I declined Kate's offer. I had no intention of helping someone who had treated me poorly. I understood Spencer's feelings as a son, but I couldn't agree to support Kate under those circumstances. I told Spencer, "I will help you with this trip, but only if you agree to my conditions." The first condition was that Spencer must intervene whenever Kate mistreated or overly criticized me. The second was that I would establish some ground rules for Kate, write them down, and post them around the house. If Kate couldn't agree to these conditions, we would have to ask her to leave. Spencer agreed to these terms, and we decided to implement them after the trip. I asked my friend to post the rules while we were away. We would continue to act normally until the trip was over, and then we'd put our plan into action. Spencer agreed, and I decided to go on the trip with them. The next day, I informed Kate that I would be joining them. I kept reminding myself to be patient just a little longer. On the day of the trip, Spencer handled everyone's bags as we prepared to leave the house. Kate's bullying began immediately. "You don't need to carry the bags. Let Emily do it," she said. Spencer glanced at me apologetically, and I complied, believing it was better to avoid conflict. However, the bags were extremely heavy, and managing them while taking care of Sean left me exhausted. The journey involved taking an Amtrak train followed by a drive over a mountain road to the hotel. The exterior and interior of the hotel were stunningly luxurious. Sean was thrilled, exploring every corner, while Kate admired the decor and checked us in at the front desk. As I grabbed my bag and prepared to head to our room, Kate's next words took me by surprise. "Were you planning to stay with us?" "I only made a reservation for the 3 of us." I was stunned and speechless. It became clear that Kate had invited me on this trip solely to serve as a porter and never intended for me to stay. Gradually, the reality of the situation sunk in. I asked Kate, "Then where should I sleep?" Her response was dismissive. "I don't know and I don't care. Why don't you just camp out in the woods?" I was taken aback. She had invited me on this trip only to suggest that I sleep outside. I was seething with anger, and I almost shouted at her, but she and my family had already disappeared down the hallway. "I'll see you at checkout time," Kate called back over her shoulder. Left standing alone in the lobby, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. I had suspected there was a catch, but being forced to camp out was beyond what I had imagined. Tears welled up in my eyes as I made my way out of the hotel. Spencer sent a brief message saying, "I'm sorry." I was too hurt and angry to respond. After noon, I found a cafe for lunch and later stumbled upon an open field where I could see the sunset. Just as I settled in, my friend called, "Hey, how's the trip going?" "But you asked." I had given her a duplicate key and informed her of the situation beforehand. She was furious and offered to come pick me up, but I declined. I appreciated her offer, but I knew leaving now would mean Kate getting exactly what she wanted. Unsure of what Kate might do next, I decided to consult a lawyer. I sent him the evidence of the mistreatment, preparing to pursue a case for emotional abuse. If it turned out that Kate's actions were premeditated, she would be asked to leave after the trip. I couldn't find a legal claim, but I had solid evidence that should have supported my case. The lawyer assured me that I had grounds to proceed if I chose to. After the call, the mental and physical exhaustion hit me hard, and I collapsed onto the fresh grass. I spent the night in an open field with a stunning view and a cool breeze, feeling both the beauty and the weight of the situation. The next morning, I met up with Kate and my family just in time for checkout. "Emily, did you actually sleep in the woods? I bet you didn't even clean up. You're so filthy," Kate sneered. Spencer tried to intervene, but Kate quickly shifted the topic. It was clear he had mentioned that pushing me out was excessive. Kate gushed about how nice the hotel had been, but Sean's smile was my only comfort as we headed home. Once we arrived, Kate immediately began to yell, "What's all this? Don't mess with me." Rules were posted all over the house, and it was evident she had seen them as her face flushed with anger. When Spencer showed her the IOU, her face went pale and her mouth fell open in shock. At first, she tried to deny everything, but when pressed, she confessed to squandering her husband's life insurance money and borrowing more once it ran out. Spencer and I proceeded with our plan. "I can't have someone with debt living with us," I said. "You need to leave. And since I have evidence of how you've mistreated me, I will be suing you." I played the recording for her. As she listened, her face turned ghostly white, and she begged me to let her stay. I told her she could remain if she adhered to the rules and refrained from aggressive behavior. She eagerly agreed and apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry. Please help me." I never thought I'd see her like this, I thought, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. When I thought the ordeal was finally over, my knees gave way, and I collapsed to the floor. Spencer quickly helped me into a chair and then began to confront Kate about her debts. It was clear that his respect and trust in her had shattered. Kate, who had never imagined facing such a fierce rebuke from her son, frantically apologized. Once everything was settled, she fell silent, staring blankly at the sky for the rest of the day. The atmosphere in our home changed dramatically the next morning. I woke up early as usual and started preparing breakfast. Kate, however, made a cutting remark right away. The difference was in Spencer's response. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday," he said firmly, causing Kate to fall silent and retreat to the sofa. I almost felt a pang of amusement at the sight, but I managed to stay focused on preparing breakfast. Spencer was grappling with guilt for not protecting me and struggling to stand up to his mother. Despite this, I knew he was a kind man, and there must have been reasons for his previous inaction. I couldn't bring myself to hate him for it. He tearfully apologized to me, and from then on, he supported me and kept a closer watch on Kate. Her attitude toward me improved daily. While she still made occasional comments, they lacked malice. I hoped this new dynamic would last. For the first time, I could breathe easily and maintain a healthy mindset. The debt repayment was set at $700 a month. Spencer and I worked together to manage it as Kate was too elderly to work. I took a part-time job to balance work and home life, and Kate took responsibility for taking Sean to and from daycare. She did a good job with this. Spencer took over managing the family finances, which helped improve our situation little by little. No matter how much you love your husband, dealing with a difficult mother-in-law can make you consider divorce. Although I couldn't bring myself to do that, I reflected on how much easier life could have been if I had acted sooner. Still, finding that Iowa was a turning point that helped me rebuild my family. I was grateful to my friend for her support and encouragement. Without her, I might have faced a mental breakdown. I deeply cherish our friendship. Looking back, I feel a sense of accomplishment for holding my family together through the tough times. Even when I was exhausted and unmotivated, I made sure to fulfill my responsibilities to ensure a decent life for everyone. Though I may never fully forgive Kate, I intend to treat her kindly as my mother-in-law. Years have passed and my son has started preschool. We are nearing the end of paying off the debt and considering a move to a new house. Kate has begun helping me more, and my relationship with Spencer has improved significantly. We're even contemplating having another child. Our family is stable now, and I'm content with our progress. I will continue to do my best for my family, always striving to support and nurture them.
Cynthia, are you okay? Tears welled up in my husband's eyes as he spoke to me. I had suddenly developed severe stomach pain right after eating the beef stew made by Olivia and was rushed to the hospital. In the hospital room, my husband showed me a video. What is this? Upon seeing the video and understanding the situation, I immediately felt an overwhelming nausea and covered my mouth with both hands. This is absolutely unforgivable. The video clearly showed Olivia moving in and out of the toilet while cooking. I am Cynthia, a 25-year-old office worker. My husband Kevin, who is 3 years older than me, and I are about to celebrate our 3rd wedding anniversary. Kevin and I married following his earnest approach, but even after 3 years of marriage, we have not been able to find much time just for the two of us. I got promoted right after getting married and have been extremely busy ever since. Still, Kevin always says gently, "I am happy just being married to you, so don't worry about it." I'm sorry, Kevin, and thank you. Kevin and I live in a family-oriented condominium. Both of us strongly desire to have children, so we chose this place with the future in mind. Here with Kevin, I'll build a warm family and welcome the children we'll have someday. But my busy schedule never eased, and we couldn't have a child for 3 years. Then one day, as we were eating dinner as usual, Kevin spoke to me with a serious expression. "Hey, I got promoted. I think my salary will increase significantly, so if it's okay with you, Cynthia, how about you quit your job and become a housewife? Let's seriously think about having children." I was surprised by the sudden suggestion. A promotion? That's great. Yeah, I've been thinking about children too. I want to start preconception care seriously. And so, our journey into preconception care began. However, it turned out I had difficulty conceiving. And even after 6 months of preconception care, we still hadn't been blessed with a child. I'm sorry. It seems like it didn't happen this month either. And don't apologize, Cynthia. It's not your fault. Every time I felt down, Kevin would gently stroke my head. I'm so grateful to be married to such a kind person. Not just Kevin, but his mother Olivia has also been kind to me lately. Hearing that we were having trouble conceiving, Olivia started visiting us occasionally. She began living alone in an apartment near her home after my father-in-law passed away a few years ago. Olivia, who dotes on her only son Kevin excessively, has been good to me since the beginning of our marriage. Olivia brings over lots of side dishes, saying, "You need to eat nutritious food. Rest up, Cynthia. I'm alone and free, so don't worry about me." I have to take care of Kevin's wife, and she even prepares meals for us. Moreover, Olivia says, "I don't want to impose on Cynthia and never stays to eat with us. No matter how much I invite her, Olivia is such a kind person." Kevin must have grown up with that kindness. I couldn't be more grateful for this blessed environment. Then one day, I was feeling under the weather and lying on the sofa as dinner time approached. Olivia, having heard about it from Kevin, came over with a worried look, bringing dinner she had prepared. "Cynthia, are you okay? This is fried chicken I just made. Kevin hasn't come home from work yet, but I thought I'd bring it over early so you can eat it while it's hot. Wow, really? Thank you. Won't you be with me, Olivia? When I invited her, Olivia shook her head. I already ate at home. I'll go back now, she said and left quickly. I'm happy she's considerate, but I wish we could have a meal together. Maybe I should invite her more firmly next time. While pondering this, I took a bite of the fried chicken Olivia had brought. Instantly, ouch! What I felt was a sharp pain in my cheek, and I let out a small cry. I hurriedly spat out the hard object from my mouth and was shocked at what it was. What is this? Glass? It was a piece of glass about 3 inches in size. Was this in the fried chicken? As my heartbeat quickened, desperately I racked my brain. Did Olivia put it in? No, that can't be. Olivia wouldn't do such a thing. Maybe she broke some dishware nearby, and it got mixed in with the batter. Yes, that must be it. Thinking that the kind Olivia could never do something so malicious, I decided not to worry too much about it, despite feeling a little uneasy. Telling her there was glass in the dish made would surely shock her, so I decided not to mention it to either Olivia or Kevin. A week passed, and my health did not improve. Hearing this, Olivia began bringing over dishes almost daily. However, since then, I frequently found foreign objects in the dishes. Hair in the hamburger, bugs in the chili con carne, and it always happened when Olivia brought over dishes just for me before Kevin returned from work. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Alarmed, I decided to talk to Kevin. You know, I'm hesitant to say this, but sometimes there are things like glass shards or bugs in the dishes Olivia brings over. It only happens when she brings dishes just for me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but it's happening too often. Kevin looked utterly surprised as I spoke. Mom, she seems to like you, Cynthia, and doesn't look like someone who would harass. But now that you mention it, she's been complaining about her forgetfulness lately. Could she have started developing dementia? Saying this, Kevin seemed lost in thought. I like Olivia too and don't want to suspect her, but it's scary since it involves food. I've been feeling unwell lately, which makes me even more worried. Yes, I have been feeling unwell since then. Feeling unwell. Haven't you been late on your period this month? Could it be that you're pregnant? Kevin's words made me realize. That's true. I'll go to the hospital tomorrow. Saying this, I was visibly unsettled, and Kevin gently stroked my head. I'll talk to Mom about it tomorrow. I have the day off. If she really might have dementia, we need to think about what to do. Don't worry, Cynthia, okay? Thank you, Kevin. So I left the matter with Olivia to Kevin and decided to visit the hospital the next day. The delay in your period hasn't been long enough to confirm pregnancy yet, but your symptoms are similar to early pregnancy nausea. Please take care not to strain your body too much, said the doctor at the hospital. I returned home, my heart fluttering with hope. I might be pregnant. If that's true, it's finally happening, though it wasn't confirmed yet. I was somewhat elated, unaware of what was to come next. When I got home, Kevin was sitting on the sofa with a troubled look. Mom might be starting to develop dementia. She doesn't remember anything about the foreign objects in the dishes. I'm thinking of taking her to the hospital soon, he said. Hearing this, I felt a mix of relief that Olivia wasn't doing it intentionally and concerned that she might have dementia. I installed a caregiving monitoring camera at Mom's house today. This way, we can respond immediately if anything happens to her, Kevin continued. That's good to hear. It eases my mind a bit. I'm mostly at home, so I'll try to keep an eye on it as much as I can, I replied. I missed the chance to tell Kevin about the possibility of being pregnant as I saw him looking downhearted about Olivia. Well, it's not confirmed yet. It's better to report it once I'm sure, I thought. Then, the next day at noon, the doorbell rang. When I looked through the monitor, there was Olivia standing at the front door, holding a large pot. What are you doing with such a big pot? I hurriedly went to greet her. Olivia looked down apologetically. Cynthia, I heard everything from Kevin about foreign objects mixed in dishes. I don't know how to apologize, she said. It's okay. It wasn't intentional, and I noticed everything before swallowing. so there's no harm done to my body. Please don't be too hard on yourself, I reassured her. As I said this, I thought I saw Olivia's eyebrows twitch slightly. I made this beef stew as an apology. You haven't had your period, right? In case you're pregnant, you need to eat nutritious food. I put lots of healthy ingredients in it, so eat up, Olivia said, handing me the pot. Wait, how did you know I haven't had my period? Did Kevin tell you? I asked. Ah, yes, that's right. Kevin sent me a message about it yesterday. Olivia replied hurriedly, almost as if she was in a rush. Thank you, I said, feeling uneasy as Olivia left. I placed the pot Olivia gave me in the kitchen and served myself some beef stew. It was just about lunchtime, so I thought it was a good time to eat. As I sat down and tasted the beef stew, I noticed an indescribably unpleasant flavor. What's this? Could it be a mistake in the seasoning? I wondered. But I couldn't just throw away the beef stew Olivia had made, so I managed to finish the serving I had dished up. However, by then, the strange taste of the stew had made me feel quite ill. As I was washing the dishes, suddenly I felt a sharp pain in my stomach and doubled over on the spot. What is this? Could the beef stew have been spoiled? The pain intensified over time, and I broke out in a cold sweat. Unable to endure it any longer, I called an ambulance with trembling hands. Then I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I saw the stark white ceiling of the hospital. Where am I? Oh, I remember now. My stomach hurt in a daze. I gently rubbed my stomach. It seemed I had already been treated as the pain had subsided. Then, a nurse entered the room. Oh, you're awake. I'll get the doctor right away, she said with a smile and quickly returned with the doctor. Cynthia, how are you feeling? Did you eat something bad before the stomach pain started? A gentle-looking male doctor asked me in a calm tone. Just before, I ate beef stew made by my mother-in-law, Olivia. It tasted a bit off, so maybe it was spoiled, I replied. As I pondered and spoke, the doctor nodded while listening. I see. Given your symptoms, it's likely some bacteria got into your stomach, causing the pain. If it was spoiled, that would make sense. You might continue to experience some abdominal pain for a while, but as long as you take your medicine, you can recover at home, the doctor explained. Hearing his words, I felt a little relieved. I'm relieved it's not serious enough for hospitalization. Please rest quietly here for today. Call us if you need anything, the nurse said before leaving the room. Right after that, the door of the room burst open energetically. Cynthia, are you okay? There stood Kevin, panting, his face pale with worry. Kevin, I'm okay. It seems I ate something bad. They said I can go home if I take the medicine, but I might have to stay here tonight, I explained. Despite telling him it was just food poisoning, Kevin's face remained pale. Cynthia, what did you eat right before the stomach pain started? You don't need to downplay it for my sake. Please tell me the truth, he pleaded earnestly. Surprised by Kevin's earnest expression, I responded, Kevin, you're overreacting over a simple case of food poisoning. Olivia brought over some beef stew, but it seems it was spoiled. I thought it tasted strange, but it's my fault for not stopping her. Olivia was just trying to care for me. Kevin took a deep breath to calm himself and sat down on the chair beside the bed. Cynthia, look at this, he said, taking out a tablet from his bag and showing me the screen. It was a video of Olivia's house. This is it, the monitoring camera you set up at Olivia's place. I asked, and Kevin nodded. Exactly. It's a recording from a few hours ago, when Mom was making the beef stew she brought to you, Kevin explained. Sure enough, Olivia was seen in her kitchen preparing beef stew. There was nothing unusual at first glance. After finishing, Olivia untied her apron and went into the bathroom. Kevin, what is this supposed to mean? I asked, bewildered. Just as I was about to ask, what appeared next on the screen left me speechless. Olivia came back from the bathroom holding a plastic container, then went back into the bathroom again. A few minutes later, she emerged and poured the contents of the container into the stew pot. So the beef stew had Olivia's waste mixed into it.
No, can it be? I felt a sudden surge of nausea and covered my mouth with both hands. My heart raced with disgust, and I couldn't stop trembling. On the screen, Olivia was mixing something while stirring the pot with a ladle. I listened closely to her words and froze in horror. Won't allow a child. I won't let anyone take Kevin away from me, Olivia muttered with a fierce expression. I was too terrified to speak, only able to shiver. Kevin held me tightly. I'm sorry, Cynthia. I know this is shocking. When I heard you were staying in the hospital, I went home to get some things and saw Mom's pot in our kitchen. I feared she might have put something strange in it again. When I checked the camera footage, this is what I found. Kevin spoke in a quivering voice. This can't be brushed off as forgetfulness. It's clearly malicious, I whispered, and Kevin apologized deeply. I'm so sorry, Cynthia. I understand if you want a divorce after this. I'm so sorry for what my mom did, he said, shocked. I shook my head in disbelief. Stop it, Kevin. It's not your fault, I spoke in a panic. The door to the hospital room opened with a noise. Kevin, what are you doing? Came Olivia's voice, voicing her surprise as she entered the hospital room. Olivia, the Olivia I had adored until just a moment ago, now seemed so terrifying. I was so scared of Olivia that I couldn't utter a word. Meanwhile, Kevin, without hesitation, approached Olivia as soon as he saw her. Mom, what have you done? He grabbed Olivia's shoulders and shouted loudly. Startled by the sudden confrontation, Olivia's eyes widened. What? What are you talking about? What did I do? She exclaimed, shocked. Don't play dumb. What did you feed Cynthia? Kevin's words were firm. Olivia's expression twitched. Oh no, did I make something strange again? I'm sorry, Cynthia. I'm becoming forgetful lately. Olivia tried to pass it off with a smile. However, Kevin thrust the tablet screen in front of Olivia. It's all recorded here, Mom. Why? Why did you do this? Kevin confronted Olivia with a voice deep with anger. Unable to say anything in return, Olivia just looked down silently. Olivia, did you do all that on purpose? I managed to ask with a trembling voice. Olivia then glared at me with hatred. Yes, it was on purpose. I thought you might be pregnant after hearing about your continued illness. A child with Kevin. I could never allow that. Olivia's face was filled with malice, but I didn't back down. After being so kind to me all this time, why suddenly? If I did something wrong, please tell me, I said, gripping the sheets tightly. Olivia sneered at my desperate expression. Oh, Cynthia, I never liked you. I resented you for taking away my precious only son, but I had to be kind to avoid being disliked by Kevin. Olivia's words sent chills down my spine. But enough was enough. I had always believed in Olivia. I loved her, convinced she wasn't the kind of person to be malicious. But now enough is enough. I felt something inside me go cold. Olivia's revelation shook me to my core. Kevin seemed too drained to be angry anymore. I addressed Olivia with a cold voice, cutting through the air with sternness. Olivia, what you did is a crime. Deliberately contaminating food and planting a listening device in someone's house. Once I recover, I will pursue legal action. Don't think you can get away with this, I declared, surprisingly calm amidst the turmoil of emotions. The anger and fear towards Olivia, the sadness of being betrayed, it all seemed irrelevant now. I feel nothing towards you anymore. Right now, all I want is to be away from someone like you as soon as possible. I will hire a lawyer, so communicate through them from now on, I continued, unmoved by Olivia's shocked expression. Wait a minute, a crime? Am I going to be arrested? It's ridiculous to sue me for this. What do you mean? Olivia's eyes widened in disbelief, trying to downplay her actions. Your actions have caused real harm to my body. There's evidence. Don't think you can talk your way out of it, I asserted firmly. As I spoke, Olivia grabbed Kevin's hand, trembling. That's it, his true nature. She's the kind of woman who bullies an old lady. Scary, isn't it? I did everything thinking of you, Kevin. You understand, don't you? Olivia appealed with a seemingly gentle smile, but Kevin's response was firm. What are you talking about? The scary one is you, Mom. And what you did wasn't for me, it was all for yourself. You hurt someone important to me for your own sake. I never want to have anything to do with you again. Let's cut ties, Kevin said, shaking off Olivia's hand decisively. Kevin, I'm sorry. It was all my fault, please. I have no one but you, Olivia cried out, banging on the door in the hallway. Soon, security came due to the commotion and took Olivia away. Afterwards, my health quickly recovered, and I was able to return home safely upon discharge. We submitted the camera footage to the police, and an investigation began immediately. The listening devices in our house were found, leading to Olivia's swift arrest. Rejected by Kevin, Olivia seemed to have suffered a mental breakdown, crying and wailing during the investigation. I did nothing wrong. It's her fault for trying to take Kevin away, Olivia shouted, lashing out at the officers. Demanding compensation from Olivia, we made her pay a lump sum to cover the damages. Olivia incurred debts and now works in physical labor as a live-in worker, reportedly spending her days working hard and crying alone in her apartment. I told Kevin he didn't need to force himself to legally disassociate from Olivia, but he said, I always knew she had trouble letting go, but I never realized she was so obsessively attached. Now that I know Mom's true nature, I'm afraid to remain in a parent-child relationship with her. He immediately proceeded with the disownement process. A month later, it turned out I was pregnant. Both the baby and I were healthy and developing well. Kevin and I cried with joy and promised each other, let's build a warm family from now on. I want to create a bright future with Kevin and our baby. You're nothing without me, Jolene. His words sliced through me like glass shards, each syllable dripping with disdain. I gazed at Dalton's cold, expressionless face, searching desperately for any sign of the charming man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. But his steel blue eyes held no warmth, only a harsh reminder that the partnership I had built my life around was crumbling before me. I drew a sharp breath as the weight of his dismissal sank into my bones. After years of emotional manipulation, of walking on eggshells and making excuses for his lies, I was determined not to let him have the last word. Get out, I said, my voice low but firm. Dalton cocked an eyebrow, clearly surprised. You can't be serious, Jolene. I mean it, I said. I want you out of this house tonight. I held his glare, refusing to show weakness, though my hands trembled at my sides. Dalton let out a sharp laugh. And where would I go? You really think you can just throw me out after everything I've done for you? He took a menacing step toward me. You owe me, Jolene. Everything you have is because of me. I flexed my fingers, digging my nails into my palms as I fought to restrain the fury bubbling inside me. He was right about one thing. Everything of material value I owned was because of him, because I had sacrificed my education, my dreams, my very identity to support Dalton's ambitions while he built his empire wheeling and dealing in real estate. I had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, hosting his clients, raising our son, managing his affairs, so Dalton was free to secure bigger deals and reap the fortunes. Only now, standing face to face in our lavish but coldly impersonal house, did I fully grasp how I had squandered decades enabling a man who clearly no longer valued me. Get out, I repeated through gritted teeth, pointing at the hallway leading to the front door. I'm done being your dutiful wife. If you won't leave tonight, I will. Dalton's smug expression faltered. He blinked hard before his mouth twisted into a snarl. What has gotten into you? He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers biting into my skin. Is this about that country club receptionist? That little fling meant nothing to me. She was just a warm body when you were too busy or tired or whatever excuse you always have. His callous words sparked an image in my mind. The pretty blonde giggling on Dalton's lap last weekend, her fingers trailing along his chest. Nausea rose in my gut as the reality of his latest infidelity stared me in the face. I wrenched from his grasp, hot tears stinging my eyes. Just go, I whispered. Please, Grant deserves better than to have his final years tainted by the unraveling of his only son's marriage. At the mention of his ailing father, Dalton's face softened slightly. He studied me for a long moment before sighing loudly. "Fine, but we are far from over, Jolene," he warned. He brushed past me toward the bedroom, emerging minutes later with an overnight bag. He paused at the front door. "You really think you can make it out there without me?" He shook his head with a sneer. "Mark my words, you'll come crawling back." The door slammed shut behind him with an air of grim finality. I stood rigid, listening to the fading crunch of gravel as Dalton's sleek Mercedes disappeared into the night. In the deafening stillness, I became startlingly aware of my aloneness. I roamed from room to room, engulfed by the gnawing emptiness within me, which slowly solidified into a cold but unyielding determination. Dalton had underestimated me for the final time. Waking abruptly, I was momentarily disoriented by my unfamiliar surroundings. As consciousness settled in, the events of the previous night floated back. Dalton's callous dismissal, our explosive argument, and his dramatic departure. Sitting up on the plush guest room sofa, where I had collapsed in the early hours, I was greeted by the first rays of dawn seeping through the tall windows, casting a mocking cheerfulness about the room. Swinging my legs over the side, I buried my head in my hands with a groan, grappling with the question of what to do next. My entire adult life had revolved around Dalton, supporting his career, raising our son, managing our social calendar and household affairs. Now, for the first time in decades, I was utterly alone. A wave of melancholy washed over me as I reminisced about simpler times, sharing secret smiles over the bakery counter with the charming business student who had tirelessly pursued me during my freshman year of college. Dalton had been enchanting in those early days, lavishing me with affectionate gestures and gifts. I was the pride of my small hometown when the most eligible bachelor chose me. When Dalton proposed just 8 months after we met, I stunned my family by dropping out of school to plan our whirlwind wedding. Caught up in the intoxicating rush of young love, I couldn't fathom denying Dalton anything. However, as Dalton's ambitions swelled, the sweet gestures gradually faded. He criticized my modest career aspirations, convincing me that staying home with future children was paramount. I buried my needs and independence to support his relentless climb up the corporate ladder. Somewhere along the way, amidst the demands of work, parenthood, and societal expectations, we ceased to be partners. Dalton's ego and self-interest consumed us both. Rising slowly from the couch, resigned to face this new and daunting phase of life alone, I began to gather my belongings. My gaze fell upon the antique desk in the corner of the room, another flashy sign of Dalton's growing wealth. On impulse, I pulled open the top drawer, where amidst the clutter of pens and rubber bands, my fingers brushed against a small, unfamiliar box, my heart racing. I retrieved the velvet case and unclasped it with trembling hands. Nestled inside was a gorgeous diamond tennis bracelet, glinting boldly in the morning light. Fresh anger coursed through me as I pictured Dalton fawning over one of his flings with this extravagant gift. It was yet another representation of his selfishness, lavishing treasures on his whims while I made do with the same jewelry he had given me decades ago. My bitterness swelled, usurping the grief that had threatened to overwhelm me. Dalton had smugly declared I couldn't survive without him, convinced I would never walk away from the comfortable life his wealth afforded. Staring down at the diamond bracelet, a bold idea took shape. Dalton wasn't the only one who could play dirty. If he wanted to underestimate me, I would show him just how cunning I could be. Snapping the box closed, I tucked it into my bag with renewed resolve. I had calls to make, an overpriced divorce lawyer, a savvy real estate agent, perhaps even a private investigator. I refused to emerge from this marriage broken and destitute, simply because Dalton assumed that was my only option. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of my choices. Come what may, I would land on my feet, and karma willing, I would bring Dalton to his knees in the process. My heels clicked purposefully across the marble foyer as I returned home from my legal consultation, echoes underscoring my determination. The conversation replayed in my mind. With no prenuptial agreement in place, You have considerable leverage in the divorce settlement, my cutthroat lawyer had said, especially given the length of the marriage and assets involved. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as I set my bag down on the kitchen island, the weight of the unknown tennis bracelet still tucked inside serving as a tangible reminder of Dalton's deception. My plotting was interrupted by footsteps and a shocked gasp behind me. I spun around to find Lucia, our housekeeper, clutching her chest in the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Harris, you gave me such a fright. I did not expect anyone else to be home," she explained. Lucia had worked for our family for over a decade, her warm and non-judgmental presence a rare constant in recent years. "I'm so sorry, Lucia," I replied. "It's been a difficult couple of days around here, as I'm sure you know." Lucia nodded, her eyes gentle and understanding. "I cannot believe Mr. Harris would do this to you. You have been so good to him through all these years," she said. I sighed, the truth of her words hitting painfully close to home. All those years compromising my needs and dreams to support Dalton's ambitions. What did I have to show for it now? Just yesterday, it seemed I had lost everything. Yet Lucia's compassion and my lawyer's assurances were kindling a small but growing fire inside, steeling me for the fight ahead. "Thank you, Lucia," I said. "Your support means so much to me right now. I wasn't sure I could get through this, but I'm starting to realize. I discovered that I'm a lot stronger than Dalton ever gave me credit for." Just then, the faint sound of the front gate opening drew our attention. Moments later, Dalton strolled casually into the kitchen. Lucia and I stared at him incredulously. "Jolene, there you are." I swung by the office and had a chat with my father, Dalton said breezily, as if nothing were amiss. "He convinced me we need to figure this thing out, not toss away 22 years just because you're going through some hormonal mood swing." He glanced at Lucia. "Would you mind giving us a few minutes?" I stood frozen as Lucia nodded and slipped quietly from the room. Dalton turned to me, his expression softening. "Come now, Joe. I know things got a little heated the other night." He reached for my hand. "We're under a lot of pressure. What with father's illness, Alex graduating, and work being more demanding than ever." When I still didn't respond, he gently grabbed my shoulders. "I forgive you for your little outburst, all right? Why don't we take a weekend trip to the vineyard? Just the two of us, reconnect, and hit the reset button." My blood boiled at his audacity to waltz back in here expecting reconciliation after everything he had put me through. I wrenched from his grasp, my voice dripping with venom. "You arrogant bastard, get out before I have you thrown out." Dalton blinked in surprise. "Jolene, please, just listen," he began, but I cut him off. "No, you listen. I saw the bracelet, Dalton." His face paled. "Our marriage is over. So be yourself a favor and leave with whatever shred of dignity you have left, instead of making this uglier than it needs to be." Dalton's shell-shocked expression shifted to cold rage. He stepped forward, jabbing his finger toward me as he spat his reply. "You'll regret this, Jolene. I promise you that." I awoke the next morning feeling truly rested for the first time in recent memory. Dalton's latest attempt to manipulate me had only affirmed I was on the right path. I stretched lazily, surprised to realize I had slept through the night without aid of my usual sleeping pills. Throwing back the covers, I headed for the shower with fresh resolve, the conversation with my lawyer replaying in my mind. Document everything from this point forward. Every financial record you can get your hands on, any evidence of affairs. It will only strengthen your position. By the time I finished blow-drying my hair, I was brimming with purpose. I quickly dressed and headed straight for Dalton's home office. If he thought he could intimidate me into staying with veiled threats, he had another thing coming. I took control of my future as I rifled through Dalton's meticulously organized drawers and files, my hands expertly guiding me to the most relevant documents. Bank statements, investment reports, loan applications. I assembled anything that provided transparency into our financial lives, anything I could leverage to ensure I emerged from this divorce securely on my own 2 feet. Nearly 2 hours passed in a blur before I heard movements elsewhere in the house. I scrambled to return the home office to its original pristine condition just as Lucia appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Harris, pardon the interruption, but your lawyer is on the phone," she said tentatively. My heart leaped with renewed motivation. Snatching up my stuffed briefcase, I squeezed Lucia's shoulder appreciatively as I hurried past. "Lou, you're a gem. Wish me luck," I called over my shoulder. Safely sequestered in my makeshift bedroom suite, I eagerly accepted the call. My lawyer's smooth voice greeted me on the other end of the line. "Jolene, I have an update. My investigator uncovered something rather interesting." What followed was perhaps the final missing piece of the puzzle. In addition to evidence corroborating Dalton's long-term affair with his assistant, my lawyer had discovered questionable activity around my husband's latest real estate project. It appears Dalton and his business partner may be intentionally devaluing the property on paper while projecting high future returns to investors, he explained. "It's not definitive fraud yet, but it's ethically questionable at minimum." I shook my head in disgust as I realized I had only scratched the surface of Dalton's deceit. After profusely thanking my lawyer for the update, I hung up the phone feeling more empowered than ever. I now held the keys for my liberation from Dalton's toxic web in every sense, emotionally, financially, socially. Emboldened by this newfound evidence, I found myself actually hoping Dalton would try confronting me again. I would relish seeing the smug smile wiped clean off his face when he realized I now held all the cards. The fantasy faded as unwelcome sadness momentarily softened my resolve. Somewhere under the arrogance and duplicity lurked the man who had once made me feel cherished. I said a silent goodbye to that Dalton, the one who existed before success corrupted him completely. With peace in my heart, I tucked away the memory of him for good, along with any lingering doubts about my path forward. This was my life now, and I refused to let anyone control my fate ever again. I stared in disbelief at the documents spread across the desk before me. Financial statements, private emails, company memos, all pointing to the same devastating truth. Dalton had lied. My husband was facing bankruptcy and hadn't bothered to give me even the slightest warning. I sank back in the leather desk chair, my heart pounding as the reality of my predicament sunk in. All those years sacrificing for Dalton's ambitions, and now there was apparently nothing left to show for it. Even the lavish house I sat in was headed for foreclosure. Hot tears stung my eyes. How could I have been so stupid and naive? Of course, Dalton would find new ways to deceive me right up until the bitter end. My sadness quickly hardened into rage as I considered how easily Dalton could have hidden assets or squirreled away funds, anticipating our divorce. I rifled through the papers again, seeking clues, but found nothing concrete. My phone buzzed loudly, jolting me from my frantic research. I glanced at the caller ID, my lawyer. Taking a deep breath to steady my voice, I answered. "Jolene, I'm so sorry about this news," came the somber greeting. "Dalton has kept his financial struggles painfully quiet, it seems, but there may still be options." "Don't apologize," I interjected firmly. "You've given me a gift with the truth. No matter what Dalton tries now, he can't manipulate me anymore." I meant every word with clarity, with conviction. I refused to cower and panic in reaction to Dalton's lies. Not this time. After discussing strategy with my lawyer, renewed courage and conviction propelled me upwards. I gathered my paperwork, adjusted my dress, and strode purposely from the empty house without a backward glance. I arrived unannounced at Dalton's sleek downtown office. His receptionist gawked as I flew past her desk and barged straight through the imposing double doors. "Jolene, what are you?" Dalton sputtered, rising from behind his glass and steel executive desk. Before he could react further, I slapped down the stack of financial documents in front of him. "Game over, Dalton. I know everything," I announced. His confident expression wavered slightly. I pressed my momentary advantage. "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow. Given your situation, I expect you to be reasonable in the settlement." Dalton opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with one final blow. "And if you fight me, I won't hesitate to share every sordid detail with the board, your investors, our entire social circle. My voice rang with conviction. My lawyer seems confident that exposing your dirty laundry would rather undermine your attempts to save face and salvage your precious reputation, bankruptcy notwithstanding. Dalton Pidd sinking slowly back into his seat in tacit acceptance. His eyes narrowed, but his voice held a note of defeat when he finally replied, "You don't have to threaten me, Jolene. Despite what you may think, I have no intention of leaving you destitute." I nodded curtly, maintaining my defensive facade despite the tempest of emotion swirling inside me. I turned on my heels without another word, refusing to let Dalton see me crumble yet again. Safely outside, I sucked in ragged gulps of air, willing my thundering heart to quiet and the sting of tears to abate. So this was it, the demise of the future. I had staked everything on straightening my back. I began the long walk back to grab my things from the house I could no longer call home. Yet amidst the uncertainty now before me, each step fueled a growing flicker of hope inside my heart. I was finally taking back control of my life, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. I took a deep, steadying breath as I prepared to sign the final divorce decree. After weeks of tense negotiations, we had finally reached an agreement. I would retain ownership of our main residence and receive a sizable portion of marital assets. Dalton would keep his summer beach house and the remaining investments. Just sign the damn thing so we can end this charade of a marriage once and for all. Dalton grumbled, shoving the paperwork toward me. I picked up my pen, hesitating even now. Parting ways with Dalton for good unleashed a swirling vortex of emotions I thought I had neatly compartmentalized. Sensing my reluctance, Dalton seized the opportunity to twist the knife one final time. Having second thoughts about throwing away your cushy future as Mrs. Dalton Harris? Not so easy to give up the private jets and beachside villas for a life of mediocrity, is it? His smug expression fueled my mounting anger, vanquishing any last shred of sadness. I met his contemptuous gaze head on. "Quite the contrary, Dalton," I replied evenly. "I discovered recently that I have assets of my own." His eyes narrowed at my cryptic response. I continued, "Remember that lakeside property I inherited from my grandmother years ago? The one you insisted I sell right away so you could fund your newest development." Dalton shifted uncomfortably at the long-forgotten memory. After ignoring his demands to liquidate the modest land asset, I had tucked away the property deed, retaining my small connection to family history. Well, it turns out that land is now prime real estate worth nearly $2 million, I revealed casually. "So you see, I'll manage just fine on my own." Dalton's face morphed from confusion to disbelief to outrage in quick succession. He sputtered indignantly, "What? You can't prove." "No matter." I cut off his rambling threats with a wave of my hand. "Don't waste your time or money, Dalton. The property is solely in my name. But by all means, take me to court if you need yet another public humiliation." I signed the divorce decree with flourish and pushed it back across the table, relishing this final victory. For a brief moment, I allowed smug satisfaction to replace the swirling emotions I had bottled up for too long. I stood calmly, gathering my belongings while Dalton stared at me wildly, the new reality settling over him. "Well, if we're quite finished here, gentlemen, I'll be on my way." I nodded graciously at our lawyers before turning my gaze back to Dalton. "I do hope you find some shred of human decency left in that dark heart of yours, for your sake at least, if not anyone else's." With those final words, I walked steadily from the room, only allowing myself to tremble with release once outside the oppressive atmosphere. I leaned against the cool brick wall, taking deep, healing breaths. The time had come to close this painful chapter for good and step fully into a future of my own making. While Dalton grappled with his bitter comeuppance, I felt only lightness and liberty. Tomorrow would mark the first sunrise of a life no longer confined by secrets, manipulation, or the suffocation of stunted dreams. Against all odds, I had salvaged my sense of self from the ruins of betrayal, and nothing could dampen my spirit now. I heaved a satisfied sigh. admiring my surroundings. The blank walls and bare floors held only possibility, a far cry from the cold opulence of the home. The past few months had flown by in a flurry of fresh starts, new ventures, and overdue reckonings. The sale of my inherited lakefront property had left me with newfound financial independence. After the divorce, Dalton descended swiftly into disgrace as details of his shady business dealings came to light. Meanwhile, I embraced solitude and reveled in personal growth. Now, on the eve before opening day of my very own bakery, I paused to reflect on the circuitous route that had delivered me here. Failures often plant the seeds of later success, I mused, and what felt like loss and devastation ultimately cleared the way for truer fulfillment. My philosophical rumination ended abruptly with Lucia's signature cheerful greeting. "It smells heavenly in here already," she remarked. My longtime friend and confidant had left Dalton's employment to join me in this new endeavor. Her steadfast support through all my tribulations had been a rare gift. We spent the afternoon preparing a test batch of goodies showcasing my decadent family recipes. Tomorrow, these polished granite countertops would display baskets brimming with flaky croissants, glossy fruit tarts, and artisan breads. As we worked, laughing easily together, my phone buzzed loudly in my pocket. I dusted the flour from my hands before glancing at the caller ID, an international number I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Jolene Harris speaking." I answered briskly, prepared to terminate yet another sales solicitation. But the smooth, familiar voice I heard instead jolted me completely. "Jolene, it's Dalton." "I'm sorry for the out-of-the-blue call," he said, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant and deflated. Curiosity rooted me in place. "I just heard about your new bakery on social media." "Congratulations." His voice trailed off awkwardly. "Anyway, the reason I'm calling. I know my apology likely means nothing at this point, but I wanted to express my sincere regret for how everything unfolded." I stood frozen in stunned silence, trying to process Dalton's words as he continued haltingly. "Leaving you and losing the publicity battle afterwards, it finally knocked some sense into me. I discovered who my true supporters were." Lucia and I exchanged stunned looks. Was Dalton Harris actually demonstrating humility? When I still didn't respond, Dalton pressed on. "I ended up relocating abroad to escape the drama and scrutiny. I have an opportunity to start fresh here, but before I did, I needed to make amends, to let you know how much I respect and admire you for landing on your feet. You didn't deserve how I treated you." I cleared my throat, regathering my wits after Dalton's emotional appeal. "I appreciate you saying all of that, Dalton. I can't erase the pain you caused, but healing comes from moving forward with wisdom and grace." We exchanged a few more awkward pleasantries before hanging up. As I slowly set down the phone, Lucia appeared by my side, concern crinkling her warm eyes. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. Considering the question, I took full stock of my emotional state. To my pleasant surprise, instead of the usual hurt and frustration Dalton's presence evoked, I felt only forgiveness and peace. His mistakes were no longer mine to carry. Meeting Lucia's caring gaze, I gave her a genuine smile. "Actually, yes, I'm more than all right." "For the first time in ages, I feel completely free," I said. She squeezed my hand supportively, a look of pride and joy lighting her face. Together, we turned our focus back to preparing for tomorrow's grand opening. With clarity and purpose, I stepped wholly into the life and dreams I had deferred for too long.